gentlemen, my name is Sid Jones, here with RoX-TV, and I am here with the frontman of GraveRobber. I have met this guy back in 06, and I must say, when my first time seeing them was my first ever punk show. Saw them again in 07 in Saginaw, where he'll be performing tomorrow night. Is that right, sir?
That is correct. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. There was one thing that I was really interested in back in when I'd first seen you, and I noticed that it still carried along, was you tied in religion with horror, which to me was an anomaly. And I remember you saying in an interview where you said, we weren't even sure if we could make this work, and we did. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first, I don't mean to sound like I'm correcting you, but GraveRobber doesn't have a whole lot to do with religion. We have a whole lot to do with the Reanimator. And as I've read the text, it doesn't sound like he was real fond of religion either. So the way we tie it in is recognizing some things that were inside the 66 books that comprise the Bible that have things about blood and death, but more importantly, resurrection, coming back to life, coming from death into life. I may look dead, but really this is a representation of the process of coming from death to life.
When did you decide that this was going to be the path that you were going to take, being from the dead and from like the worst part, like the rock bottom and below that surface, even to do this to where it's rising up and bringing people together?
Well, if you're asking me how did GraveRobber come about, here's the truth. You want to hear the true story? The original members of GraveRobber, who are no longer in the band anymore, all attended the same ecclesia, or what is commonly known as a church. And we were all worship leaders, and we were all extremely immature. One night, our pastor was talking about Romans 6, teaching us that we are dead to the world system, dead to sin. Immediately following that, we took communion, which is symbolic of eating the flesh and drinking the blood. And so we were like, oh, great, we're dead guys. And we were all Misfits fans, so the Huntingtons were a band that sounded like the Ramones, and we thought maybe there needs to be a band that sounds like the Misfits. But we didn't think that it would ever be acceptable. We didn't think anyone would ever want to hear it. And there still are people that don't want to hear it.
Well, I think
but we don't play for those people. They have Michael W. Smith to listen to. They have Skillet. They can go do that. We would prefer to play for people that are like us, the Misfits. And I don't mean the band, but I mean miscreants. People that feel like they don't fit in, because the reality is, all of us who don't feel like we fit in, we belong together. We do fit in.
You know, you haven't been back in Detroit, and you said it's your first time coming back in, I believe you said 5 years. Am I right on that?
Yeah, 5 or 6 years. I don't know. My feeble zombie brain isn't what it used to be.
What's it like being back in Detroit? I know you talked about it on stage a little bit, but for this interview, I'm going to ask, like, you saw, as you said, it was kind of like not so good back in the day. And then it kind of transformed and kind of rose again from rock bottom and came up, and it's like almost like an embodiment of what you guys have talked about since the beginning.
Indeed. Well, your first question was, how does it feel to be back in Detroit? And I'm originally from Michigan, so it feels like home. Feels more like home than my actual home. I have a strong affinity for Michigan, and especially this area. So I love coming here. Secondly, I love watching a city pull itself up by its own bootstraps. I like seeing a city that says, we're not going to wait on a bailout from the government. We're going to do it ourselves. And people can laugh if they want to about Kid Rock, but I got to give him props for all the money that he has poured into this city and how much he cares for it.
And the music scene as well. He's helped save venues, you know, and music has become the heart of Detroit.
Yes, and it always should be. This is Detroit Rock City. And I mentioned from the stage Bob Seger, Ted Nugent, Alice Cooper, the MC5, Death, the Romantics, the Stooges, all of Motown. This is a very vibrant musical city, and there's a pulse and there's a groove that the bands from here all have that you don't find anywhere else in the world. When you hear a band from Detroit, you know they're from Detroit.
And I kind of got a lot of that from when I was in, again, back, I think it was a nursing home, actually, or something like that. It was a thrash bash in 2006, something that my secretary of the school helped put together, believe it or not. Wish I could remember her name. But when I was listening to your guys' music then, I heard a lot of the Detroit sound. And I remember one of the songs you did back in the day was called Love Hurts, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And I noticed that your music has kind of evolved and perfected in a sense where it went from like Love Hurts to like even much more darker, even layered songs. Can you tell us about that transformation?
Well, I just think the longer you play, the more risk you take. And some of them work, some of them don't. And when it works, you hold on for dear life.
Hold on for dear life. I like that. Do you have any projects coming out soon that you might be working on here in the future?
We are so incredibly busy this year. We're writing new material. A new album is in the works. We have every year we record a Christmas song and just put it out for free. But this year we're going to compile all of the Christmas songs along with a few new ones. We'll track a couple more and put them on, make one CD of all the Christmas songs. Starting next week, we start working on an acoustic record, which is just 5 songs recorded acoustically. But we welcomed our friends, family, fans, maybe even some enemies to submit their versions of GraveRobber songs done acoustically. So it's a very special project, and that's coming out soon. Plus, we're shooting a trilogy of videos with a director who was trained by George Romero, so that should be a very special project as well. And we're also developing new masks, new costumes, so the whole thing is going to be revamped. And we actually plan on learning how to play our instruments.
I love
that. Will change everything.
I love that line. It's one of my favorite things that I love hearing in punk. And that's how you know it's a punk band and how it's true to its roots. It's one day we'll learn to play our instruments. Darby even said
I'm joking. The guys in the band are actually very, very talented.
You guys are absolutely phenomenal. I love how that's an ongoing joke in punk because I feel like that's one of its, one of the things that makes it punk. It's like, jokes that bands are making, like I said, the Germs and Darby Crash was saying, like, one day we'll learn to play our instruments, even though they'd already come out with an album.
Yes, of course they knew how to play. Of course the Ramones knew how to play. Of course they all know how to play.
Except Sid Vicious couldn't play a bass guitar to save his life.
And I would agree. He was pretty terrible.
So, other than the Misfits, what other influences did you have?
Well, Alice Cooper for sure.
I couldn't tell.
And a lot of people think that we're influenced by Gwar, but that's not really true. It's just the get-up.
Right.
But I don't dislike them. It just wasn't a big influence. But Alice Cooper, Kiss, I would say the Ramones and the Misfits, and those were the main ones, for sure.
To the people that you were talking to tonight about like the methamphetamines and the crisis with drugs, people taking poison and putting into their bodies, what is your advice to them on getting over that?
Reach out for help. Don't do it alone. We're not designed to be lone rangers. Human beings are designed to be pack animals.
It's interesting you say that because they say that is the worst thing. In prison, they will put you in solitary confinement, and that is the worst thing because you're able to socialize with nobody.
And if you have trouble, you reach out. You reach out to someone else. That's the way we're designed. That's how life is supposed to be. I think one of the greatest and worst things that ever happened to us was social media. Great because we can reach out. Bad because some guy living in his basement of his mom's house eating a bag of Cheetos can, talk trash about someone thousands of miles away from sitting in his underwear, and nobody can do anything about it. And what people don't realize is there are real people on the other end that are receiving those negative messages. So I like to speak out against that pretty regularly. But I hate drugs. I really do. Too much death. I'm tired of death. I may look like I'm embracing it. I'm not embracing it. I'm standing up to it. I'm putting my foot down.
And in a sense, you're giving people an idea of, like, you know, what they're looking at is like their internal selves rather than their exterior. I noticed that too.
Absolutely.
In your music, I was picking that up, and I was like, it's a reflection.
So many people think that skulls are evil, but the reality is everyone's carrying one around.
Right. I think it's the fear of, like, knowing. It's the fear of, I don't want to pay attention to that because, you know, there was a comedian I was listening to who goes, every one of you at least 2 o'clock in the morning went, shit, I'm going to die one day.
Everyone thinks about it, but the reality is, what are you going to do while you're alive, while you have the opportunity to do something great? And you do have the opportunity. Doing something great doesn't mean something on a worldwide scale. Doing something great could be just not changing the world, but changing your world.
I think that's awesome advice, man. Like I said, I'm blessed to have heard your music, and it gave me a different perspective, and it made me look at things differently. There's a book that I had read from Greg Graffin. It's called Anarchy Evolution. And he even says in this book, and he said in many of things, where, you know, Jesus would have been our biggest fan. You know, this person would have been our biggest fan. It's not that we are against the belief of that. We are against organized religion.
Well,
what are your thoughts on because you said, you know, we're not religious, but we believe in, you know, the resurrection of you know, somebody who's able to raise the dead.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on religion as a whole and the corruption of it?
Well, as I read through the scriptures, the only time I see Jesus getting heavy-handed is with religious people. That tells me that I might not want to be on the receiving end of that. Tells me that maybe I want to be on his team, not fighting against him. And being on his team means that I follow him, not a man-made system. And all too often, people fight against him when what they really want to fight against is the hypocrisy. But if clearly he hated hypocrisy. He loved people that were failures. I'm a failure. He loves me.
I think that...
So I have to pass that along to others.
And I agree with that, man. Like I said, one of the things that I really, truly appreciated was some of the things that I was hearing in your music when you're giving that message without it being, you know, crammed in people's throats. And I think that's what's different about GraveRobber that separates them from other bands, is that you guys have a message, and you put it out in dialogue, and you're like, if you want to talk to about us, in private, we'll talk. You know, I really appreciate everything that you guys do, musically and intellectually. You know, your philosophy is absolutely sound, and it actually put me on that track, you know?
It's good to hear. I had to stop myself tonight because I realized that I was starting to preach like Phil Anselmo, and I had to kind of stop that. I had to be careful.
I do the same thing. I ramble and I rant. I'll be in the middle of asking a question, and it just kind of carries on, you know? Do you have any shout-outs, any advice you want to give to the people that'll be watching this?
Let's see, shout-outs. Well, I mean, to all the bands that are on our label, Rottweiler Records, shout out to them. One of the biggest shout-outs we got to say is to Kyle, the promoter tonight, who did an incredible job organizing everything, and just to the people for coming out, really. I mean, there's the obvious shout-out to our king.
Absolutely.
So shout-out to him, of course, because if not for him, we wouldn't even be doing what we're doing.
Where can we find you on social media? I know you're at GraveRobber.
Where can you not? No, I'm kidding. We're on Facebook. The URL is GraveRobber Punk 2. Long story. Twitter.
I like that.
Instagram. Google is your friend. You can find us very easily.
That's how I managed to find you guys. I was actually scrolling through, and your show actually popped right up when I was looking at punk shows in the Detroit area. So I was like, I can't miss this. That was 2 months ago, actually, when that popped up, and I was like, excellent. This is good stuff. So I made sure I wanted to get with you guys for this because I did not want to miss this. 16 years old, being 29 now, it's mind blowing. How far we've come,
Indeed.
And that we're still here.
Still here.
Doing our thing.
That's the key. One foot in front of the other. Keep pressing, keep pushing.
Everything for a reason. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to share with us? That Punk 2 thing, you kind of had me going with that. You got anything to say about the Punk 2?
Well, basically, we had two different type of pages back in the day, and Facebook decided to change their mind. Shocker. And so we had to choose one or the other, and GraveRobber Punk 2 had more people on it, so we just canceled the other one. Gotcha. It's not a very exciting story.
GraveRobber Punk 2.
If you've enjoyed this video from
RoX-TV.com,
make sure you follow RoX-TV on Facebook and YouTube. If it's underground, we're there.